Well, it's great to have Jim back on the program. Jim, how have you been?
Good. How are you guys doing?
We are doing well as it looks like the Phillies are starting to get it going here down in San Diego. They got 2 on, 2 outs, actually 2 on, nobody out in the second inning. Hey, before we get into anything A's, I want to ask you some questions that we've noticed this season. Now, obviously, coming out of COVID, and you had the alternate site, and you had so many minor league players who just did not play. Guys that were getting drafted, they didn't have a whole lot of time in college and high school. It's just been a weird period. And we saw organizations just not stretch guys out. And then you have the lockout this year. But even like the A's, at some point, we started stretching our guys out. One organization, and I don't know if you followed this with the Dodgers, they just have not been stretching at the lower level their guys out at all. Like if you start, you're going to get credit for a start, but you're only going 2 innings, at the most 3. And now we're watching what they do at the big league level in the playoffs. They pull everybody so early. What is going on with someone like the Dodgers to where nowhere in their system is anybody giving you any type of innings?
Well, I think those are 2 separate issues. One, and Dodgers maybe do it more extreme. I do think teams have been really cautious with how to handle pitchers coming off the COVID year, because as you guys know, with young pitchers, you try to build them up. You get them out of high school. If you get them out of high school, they maybe pitch 100 innings their first full season, then 120, then 140. And nobody really pitches many more than 160 in the big leagues now. In college, maybe they start at 120 because they've pitched a little bit more. But you try not to add too many innings from one year to the next. In 2020, nobody pitched. Nobody pitched in the minors. As you mentioned, teams did the alternate site stuff. That wasn't the same as pitching in like a real game situation. You're facing a lot of the same players. You have coaches playing left field because you don't have enough bodies to catch balls. It wasn't the same. So I think teams were very cautious in 2021 and again in 2022. I don't think this is something the Dodgers or other teams are, necessarily going to, have 3 inning starters, forever. But, they have watched their innings very carefully. They've tried to protect their young arms. And then I just think playoff baseball, with the game's different than from when I grew up or you guys grew up, back when, playoffs, you'd have your guys throwing complete games and, doing things like that. Now it's like you go twice through the order and most pitchers are out of there and it's mix and match. And, there's a bunch of relievers in every game. I don't think what the Dodgers do in the playoffs is related to what they've done in the minors. So.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there because we just been tracking it. It's like, wow. And then to see it, that's why watching last night's game, I don't think that's going to happen in today's game. That was watching last night's game with Darvish and Wheeler was refreshing to watch 2 guys go 7 innings, deal, and do their thing.
Yeah, and part of it is, I think, because they were pretty efficient. They give up 3 hits between them or something like that, 4 hits between them. But yeah, you're right. It just seems like if you 5 out of your starter and then it becomes a bullpen game, a lot of times in the playoffs, it's kind of crazy.
How do you think minor leagues has recovered since the pandemic and everything that we've gone through? We've had way less drafts. We've draft choices. There's been a lot of change. There's been reduction in minor leagues teams. Just how are we in minor league baseball and with what things are going on? How we've recovered from the COVID situation?
Yeah, I think people have gotten used to kind of the day-to-day reality. There's fewer teams. There's fewer players getting drafted. There's 4 full season teams. There's 1 short season teams. There's limits on players. But I do think what's still been tough even 2 years after COVID is, you're finding that the layoff really affected different players in different ways. And there are some guys who bounced right back from it, whether it's hitters or position players. Then there's other guys who were just out of whack for all of 2021. And some of that lingered into 2022. And I do think even with teams trying to be careful with pitchers, having a year where guys didn't pitch, it just feels like, I don't know. I guess pitching injuries are going up anyway. I just think as guys throw harder, guys get hurt more. But I also think we've had, more pitching injuries than feels like normal or before we had, the pandemic. I think some of that's related to the layoff. So I think in terms of everybody knowing what they're dealing with and reduced rosters and reduced draft. Everybody's used to that. But I still think that even 2 years later, we're feeling some effects from the pandemic.
Yeah, we've talked to a few college coaches when we draft guys, and we'll have the head coaches on, and they, recruiting's been different. Obviously, what's been going on, depending also where people live, right? Like obviously what happened in California and how we dealt with it versus like, let's say Texas and Florida and Arizona, hotbeds for where guys and prospects are. People dealt with it, and counties dealt with it differently. School districts dealt with it differently. So there's definitely that effect also. I wonder what that will be like years from now.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe in a couple of years we'll kind of get out of that. But you mentioned the college thing. Here's the crazy thing about college. So in 2020, you had guys who would have been juniors, 40-round draft back then, expecting to get drafted. We're probably talking, the draft got cut to 5 rounds. But, we're probably talking not everybody in the 40-round draft signs, but I'd say there are probably, I don't know, 750 to 1,000 college juniors and seniors who would have turned pro that year who didn't get the opportunity. And they came back and they got another year of eligibility. So if you're a college coach, like you said, you've taught some of these guys, it's very difficult college recruiting because guys don't declare for the draft. They just get drafted. Sometimes they sign, sometimes they don't. Your incoming recruits, same thing. So you're kind of like planning who's going to be coming, who's going to be going. And you have all these juniors you thought were going to be leaving who not only don't leave, they come back and they basically have 2 more years of eligibility. So some of those guys that if you're a college coach, you thought, again, not that you want these kids to go. I mean, they're good players, but you thought we're going to be gone in 2020 and open up scholarships. We're still on your team in 2022. And, the scholarships in most places are renewable year to year. But if you have guys who are older players, can play, you're not kicking them off your roster. And then you have incoming recruits you don't have room for. Or if you still get them to come, they don't have playing time. I think this will be the first year where they'll be kind of back to normal roster management for college coaches. But, the pandemic, I think, as we've touched on, especially with the pitching, was not a 1-year deal. It really affected all levels of baseball for, I think, at least the last 3 years.
Now, for us, obviously, young players, we went through a stretch, 3 straight years in the playoffs. Even the year before when we did make the playoffs, 186 games, we're going for it. And then a complete flip to what we saw last year, 102 losses, whether you want to call it rebuild, retool, whatever you want to call it, we're in it. And so these young guys now mean more than they ever have in recent years for the Athletics. So was there anybody that's an A farmhand that stood out for you while you're down there in Arizona?
I think Zach Geloff. I'm sorry, I'm distracted here. I don't know if you guys are watching the game too. Juan Soto just lost the ball in the sun, and now it's 2-0 Phillies. But
hey, I can tell you, I'm originally from San Diego, and all my buddies, they couldn't have been more excited when he showed up. They can't be more furious with him. The way he hasn't hit, and then, we just saw it. He missed it in the sun. Juan Soto went from like, oh, my God, this guy's the greatest. People in San Diego scratching their heads.
Yeah, I think he'll be okay in the long run. But getting back to your question, I have my TV on over here to the right, so I keep turning to the right to see what's going on there. But no, Zach Geloff kind of stood out to me the most. I'll tell you what surprised me the most about him. He looked pretty good at second base. I think of him as more of a third baseman. I know they played him a lot at second. He looked pretty good at second base when I saw him. I was there for a week. I'll go back for the final week too. But he was pretty impressive. I mean, I know he can hit. He's moved real quick in the minors. I remember I actually saw him for the first time in Arizona. We broadcast the MLB 4 tournament. I guess it would have been 2019. It was his first game he played in college. I remember watching him in BP thinking, I'd never heard of him. The way we split the draft in MLB, I have half the country, but I didn't have Zach Geloff, who's from New Jersey. So I didn't really know much about him. I'm like, man, this guy looks really good in BP. And then he hit 3 doubles in the game. But no, I think Zach Geloff, I think, the question is he a guy who's a solid player versus a guy who's like a cornerstone you build a team around? He might be more that solid regular than a, true star you build around. But he looked really good in Arizona. I mean, it's always an offensive league out there. I think the pitching's actually – it was pretty bad last year, and it might even be a little worse this year. I think, again, it's kind of related to the pandemic. in terms of teams don't send pitchers who hit their innings limits during the season, and the innings limits are lower still related to the pandemic. So you have fewer top-notch pitchers go out there. The A's are kind of an exception. I saw Mason Miller throw really hard. He didn't make it out of the second inning in the start, but I saw Mason Miller hit 100 repeatedly. I'd seen him at the combine. He was a guy I was familiar with from the draft. JT Ginn looks a lot different than I remember seeing him as an amateur before the Tommy John surgery. He used to be kind of a four-seam mid-90s guy, and now he's kind of more of a low 90s sinker slider guy. Still has a slinker, maybe not quite as powerful as it used to be. I didn't see Ryan Cusick. I know it's weird. He's not giving up any runs, and I think the league ERA is over 6 down there. But he's also not striking out a lot of guys and not throwing a lot of strikes. But I didn't get to see him personally to tell you what his stuff looks like down there.
What do you need to see? We can be generic on this. What do you need to see down there that you feel actually translates when you can really say, okay, I see that will play at the big league level?
Yeah, it's funny because, like I said, I mean, just the environment and just the talent down there, it's really slanted in favor of the hitters. So I don't even really look at performance as to more like not so much the numbers matter, but like how a guy gets to those numbers. In terms of both hitter and pitcher, is he controlling the strike zone? Are the hitters chasing? Because you can have guys who strike out 35% of the time who are still going to put up big numbers down there because the ball flies. But, are they controlling the strike zone? Or are pitchers commanding the ball? And then just kind of ease operation. Like, I mean, you can swing for the fences and probably slug 550 pretty easily down there. Just you're going to run into some balls and the ball flies. But it's more, I think, how guys do it than what they're actually doing, if that makes sense. And I mean, look, over the years, this is the 30th year of the league. They've sent more than, I don't know the exact numbers, more than 3,000 players to the big leagues. It's a crazy number. More than 60% of the guys down there play in the big leagues. And you'll see guys who are in the league now who will be in the big leagues next year. Like, I haven't done a real deep dive into playoff rosters, but I know Bryson Stott. We saw Bryson Stott in the fall league last year, and he looked really good. And now he's playing. I guess he's already hit today, but he's playing for the Phillies in the NLCS. I remember year Cody Bellinger set the National League record for home runs by a rookie. Cody Bellinger was in the fall league before. So you will see players who are in the fall league. Like, it's not just you're seeing future big leaguers. You're seeing guys who will be in the big leagues next year making an impact. Like Brendan Donovan for the Cardinals. The Cardinals had a bunch of guys. Brendan Donovan, Juan Yepes, Nolan Gorman, all played in big. Andre Palante. There's 4 guys off the top of my head who were part of a playoff team who were all in the fall league last year. So that's kind of the fun part of it. You'll see a lot of these guys pretty quick.
And you get to go to Arizona. It's not like you got to go to the middle of nowhere where some of these things in other sports are.
It's 46 right now in Chicago. It's 46 right now in Chicago. So believe me, I will not be upset when I have to go back to Arizona.
It's like my NBA buddies that go, you know what? The Summer League in Vegas, it's not a bad deal. Not a bad deal whatsoever. Did you get a chance to see Lawrence Butler or Denzel Clark while you're down there?
I don't think I saw them play. Like, it's weird too, because the way they have these large rosters and not everybody plays every day.
Yeah.
If I did, I saw them play once and they didn't make an impression. I mean, they're both interesting guys. I mean, Butler was hurt, but I think he's one of the better hurt this year. But he's one of the better young hitters in the A's system. I think he's got a chance to hit for some power and average. And Clark's like great athlete. Got Olympic relatives. He's cousin of the Naylor brothers in Cleveland. He looked great at the combine when I saw him last year. A guy who just needs more reps, but he's I'm trying to think, he might be the best athlete in the system. I'm trying to think if there's anybody better, but no, it's like I was down there for 6 days and I saw 9 or 10 games, but I was just kind of bouncing around. And it feels like if I saw those guys, I just saw them play once. I feel like I saw Geloff play 2 or 3 times.
We always like to look at the rankings, right? We'll see our top 30 on MLB.com and everybody's ranking there. How much should we at this point pay attention to that? How much does that really matter? Whether someone ranks us, are you 28th? Are you 17th? I mean, I've always looked at Houston's. They don't have the strongest ratings, but they just keep bringing up guys that keep beating us.
Yeah, well, I mean, Houston has 4 pitchers in their starting rotation who were signed internationally, I think, for less than 150,000 combined and aren't even arbitration eligible, and they're all good. And I do our Astros list, and I joke with those guys about all time. Like when the rankings come out, the farm system rankings are probably the least meaningful rankings. I always joke that the one, prospects are like kids. Everybody loves their kids more than anybody else does. And then my other joke is that when you do farm system rankings, one team's like, man, you got it just right. You got us right. And 29 other teams are like, hey, you ranked us too low. And then whenever we do the farm system rankings, and like they're not mean about it, and they deservedly so. But the Astros always be like, hey, are we going to rank 30th again? How's the 30th? Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, I know. And you guys are in the ALCS for the 6th year in a row. But like, it's weird. But like at the same time, like those rankings are the hardest rankings to do, because you think about it, each farm system has like 200 players at different levels, and you're saying, okay, who has the best talent? Like looking at 200 players at a time in 30 different organizations. And while it's an impossible task, at the same time, I do think ownership on a lot of teams looks at that, and I feel bad when like I hear from somebody who's like, well, you ranked us 24th, and the owner came down and asked what we're doing, but I don't. I mean, we do them because fans love them. We did them at Baseball America. I don't think farm system rankings matter that much, to be honest with you. I mean, the other thing I'd say about them too, I think we can identify, and I've been doing this for 30 years. I can identify 3, 4, 5 systems that are like the top systems, and I can identify 3, 4, 5 systems that are the bottom systems. And then the other 20 or so systems, you could try divide into 2 halves, but like, to be able to say with pinpoint accuracy, this team's the 5th best farm system, this team's the 10th, nobody's that good. Like if we were that good, I'd be making millions of dollars working for a team if I could pinpoint it that accurately. So, I mean, I think it gives you a rough idea, but that's really what it is more than anything. It's a rough idea where your system ranks. It's not precise by any means.
Well, everybody loves their kids, but you may favor one over the other sometimes.
True. I have 4 kids. I guess I shouldn't say that, but they're all adults now. So,
yeah. Well, I have twins, so they're identical. So it's like almost the same kid in a lot of ways. Let's end on this. How do you view the strength of where the A's system is, and how close do you really think some of these guys are at helping us at the big league level?
Yeah, man, I still think it's a couple years away. I mean, it's tough for the A's. I mean, with the stadium situation, they don't spend on payroll. Like you were saying, they'll have these cycles where they'll go to the playoffs for 2 or 3 years, and then they kind of have to, like we saw this offseason, decide, okay, we can't afford these guys anymore. We got to trade them away and then build it back up. The tricky thing for them has been a lot of their best prospects through the years have come via trades. It's not like I mean, and it's hard to crush it in the draft every year, but I'd say they're kind of ordinary draft results. So like when they make trades, they really need to hit on guys. I mean, we saw Ken Waldichuk get there this year. I like Ken Waldichuk. I think he's a little unheralded. I think Tyler Soder, like Shea Langoliers got there this year. I really like Shea Langoliers. I think having Shea Langoliers makes it easier to let Tyler Soderstrom do what he does best, which is hit. And it's always tough when you have a really offensive-minded catcher like Tyler was, where if you catch him, it detracts from his hitting because of the time you have to devote to catching and then the physical toll. So I think they're going to get more out of Tyler Soderstrom's bat. I think the big question for the A's is I don't think their system's particularly deep. And you don't have Tyler Soderstrom's a good prospect. Shea Langoliers is a good prospect. Ken Waldichuk's a good prospect, but you don't have that, Gunnar Henderson, Corbin Carroll, Francisco Alvarez, Anthony Volpe, top of the top 100 prospect where you're like, okay, we're going to build around that guy. You have some pieces where you're like, okay, these guys can be part of a winning team, but I don't know if you really have like that superstar nucleus of that winning team in place. So I think they're still going to be in search of that. I mean, they picked 18th this year, and they got 18th or 19th. They got Daniel Susac, and I like Daniel Susac, but when you're picking 18th or 19th, you're not getting that elite guy at the top of the draft. And like, I guess we won't know until the winter meetings where they're going to pick next year. Because I'm trying to think, I'm looking here at the standings. They have the 2nd worst record in baseball. But there's a draft lottery.
60.5% chance.
Yeah, but so I don't think they can pick any lower than 8th. But so they'll be in position. They should get a pretty good player next year. But I think that's the biggest challenge right now is they have some good players. I don't know if they have any great players in their farm systems.
So Julio Rodriguez is not walking through that door for us.
No, they don't have a Julio Rodriguez or a Bobby Witt Jr. or an Adley Rutschman hiding out. But like next year, I mean, let's say they get to pick at the top. You'll get a Dylan Cruz from LSU. He's an outfielder, or Chase Dollander from Tennessee's a right-hander. It would stink if you're an A's fan if they do poorly in the lottery. They could wind up with the number 1 pick. They could wind up with the number 8 pick, but we'll have to see. But at least they'll be in position. There's a good chance whoever they draft with their first round pick next year could very well be the best prospect in their system.
Hey, well, we got the draft right. We drafted the starting quarterback for the Arizona Cardinals. We got that right.
You know what, though? I don't blame them for that pick. I think they take more grief for that pick than they deserve.
We have fun with it.
Because here's why. I'm not saying he would have been this guy, but people love Kyler Murray. Had not played baseball much going into his draft year. He had played a little bit the year before. He went to the Cape Cod League, and he as he started to play, leaps and bounds. I'm not saying he would have been this guy. I had a scout with another team that thought about taking him in the first round, and they picked a couple picks behind the A's, compared him to Ricky Henderson. He thought he could be a Ricky. And now I'm not saying he would have been Ricky Henderson, but the guy, like I heard Andrew McCutchen, super, super talented player. And what people don't remember was when they drafted Kyler had only played a couple games at A&M. He'd sat on the bench at Oklahoma, I think behind Baker Mayfield, and He was small. And nobody was talking about him as an NFL quarterback. People were like, he'll probably be pretty good in that Lincoln Riley offense there at Oklahoma. But nobody was talking about him at draft time like, oh, you're going to lose this guy at the NFL draft. Like there was concern because out of high school, he pulled himself out of the baseball draft. Football was clearly his first love. But realistically looking at it, it was like this guy could be a star in baseball. And he's too small, like NFL guys. Nobody was talking about him going into that season. So I don't blame the A's. I do think it was crazy at the winter meetings that year, which I think were in San Diego, but I don't remember right. Scott Boras telling everybody, oh, no, he's going to go to spring training. And I was listening to that thinking, the Kyler Murray, not that I know him well, but that I remember covering when he was in high school, loves football. He's about to win the Heisman Trophy. He's going to get it. No, I didn't know he was going to go number 1 in the NFL draft. You know he's going to go in the first round. That guy's gone because he loves football. And Boras was telling everybody at the winter meetings, oh, no, he'll be in spring training. And at that point, he was gone. But I really – maybe I'm in the minority, but I think they took a chance at a guy who could have been a transcendent talent possibly. And at the time, nobody thought he was going to the NFL because they're like he's too small.
Oh, I remember when we drafted him, and I'm the one that interviews all the draft picks, and he and I are standing eye to eye, and I'm like, how does this guy play quarterback? And then at the same time, I was also working for the Oakland Raiders, so we played him a couple times, and it is amazing the success he has had at his size. When you
don't square him up.
Nobody
ever squares him up. He just doesn't get hit.
I know, and he has trouble seeing the field. It's amazing because his linemen are 6'5", 6'6". He's my size, 5'10". I mean, it's unreal. But, hey, always appreciate your time. We'll let you get back to this game. Means a lot that you stopped by during this game. So we truly appreciate it. You're the best at what you do. Keep doing it, and we'll be following it, obviously.
Well, thanks for all the kind words, and it's 4-1. I've missed some action here. I'll get back to that. But always good talking to you, and take care, guys. Thanks.